There's a quiet disturbance at the heart of every engineered destiny, a path designed not for growth, but for singular consumption. And its cost, not just one individual, but every bond they forge, every future they could have built, reduced to ash. This isn't about strength. This is about the subtle art of emotional manipulation, disguised as purpose. What happens when the very notion of self is a weapon handed down? You are not watching a story of choice. You are witnessing a trajectory, an inescapable sequence. You think this is about revenge. It isn't. It never was. A profound emptiness, relentlessly pursuing a fulfillment that only recedes. The narrative arc of Sasuke Uchiha is often seen as a saga of a tragic hero, a conflicted avenger. It feels grand, operatic even. But what if that grandeur is precisely the illusion? What if his journey from bright prodigy to shadowed rebel was never truly his own to author? You might recognize the pattern in yourself, in others, the pursuit of an external validation that can never satisfy. This isn't a story of free will against adversity. It's a masterclass in how a character can be carefully constructed to fulfill a predetermined role, a mechanism of trauma. For years, the perception was simple. Sasuke Uchiha, the brooding rival. He was cool, powerful, driven by the murder of his clan, a classic anti-hero. He was the dark foil to Naruto's light, a force of nature driven by vengeance. He seemed independent, making his own choices, even if they led to isolation. His aloofness was interpreted as confidence, his silence as deep thought, his genius undeniable. This was the surface-level interpretation everyone, including his closest friends, clung to. The powerful, the misunderstood, the one who walked his own path. But here's the contradiction. That independence was a carefully curated facade. His choices, often framed as rebellion, were frequently reactions to information or misdirection, specifically placed in his path. What we saw as strength was often a brittleness, masked by skill. His genius, a double-edged sword, sharpened by a singular focus that blinded him to other truths. This isn't about his moral failings, it's about the very architecture of his agency. We were told he made a choice, but was there ever truly a choice to begin with? Sasuke Uchiha was engineered, not merely written, but built with specific narrative constraints designed to keep him on a trajectory. Think about the framing, always slightly distant, always slightly more cool or dark than his peers. His silence wasn't reflective, it was a narrative void, an empty space into which others projected their hopes and fears for him. This is where it breaks. This void allowed for character manipulation to operate without immediate resistance. It made him susceptible. His contradictions are not character flaws, they are design features. The desire for revenge, which should be a driving force, simultaneously held him back from forming genuine bonds. His pursuit of power, meant to make him strong, repeatedly made him vulnerable to those who offered it. His profound isolation was not a personal preference, but a functional necessity for the plot. It ensured he could be shifted, turned, and repurposed without dismantling a complex web of relationships. It's a stark, almost brutal efficiency in storytelling. His emotional responses are often delayed, disproportionate, or entirely absent, only to resurface explosively. This isn't realism. This is pacing. It builds dramatic tension, allowing emotional moments to hit harder, but also signaling a deeper disassociation. His identity, rather than being forged through experience, was constantly being redefined by external revelations. First, the Avenger, then the hero to save his village, then the revolutionary, each identity a new cage. This wasn't growth, it was containment. His entire history, from the Uchiha massacre to Itachi's true intentions, was presented in layers, not for his self-discovery, but to shift his allegiance. Each reveal served to redirect his pre-programmed obsession. The moment he discovered Itachi's truth, his loyalty, his very understanding of good and evil, inverted. This is the mistake everyone misses. He didn't process, he reprioritized. He simply swapped one object of obsession for another. From killing Itachi to destroying Konoha, the underlying drive remained the same, an external, singular focus. His strengths, his Sharingan, his talent, were not just natural abilities. They were liabilities waiting to be exploited. His visual prowess made him a target for manipulation. His emotional sensitivity made him vulnerable to those who could weaponize his grief. The very things that defined Sasuke Uchiha as strong were the precise levers used to steer him. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? To be powerful, but to have that power exist only within the bounds of a predetermined script. Consider the role of Orochimaru, then Obito, then Itachi's ghost. Each figure provided a new mission, a new direction for Sasuke's inherent obsession. He rarely initiated, he responded. He was a vessel for narrative progression, constantly being refilled with a new purpose. This constant external direction prevents genuine internal growth. It's why his resolutions often feel temporary, his change of heart always conditional. Now, let's connect this to something far more unsettling. This pattern, this engineered obsession, isn't just about a fictional character. It mirrors a profound human psychological trap. The fear of aimlessness, the desperate need for a singular purpose, can make us vulnerable to external narratives. We latch onto a cause, an identity, a grievance, believing it gives our lives meaning. But what if that meaning is handed to us? A convenient structure to avoid the terrifying freedom of true self-definition. You see this in cults, in political extremism, in consuming hobbies. The clarity of a single goal becomes an addiction. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sasuke Uchiha became a symbol for anyone who has ever felt their identity defined by an external source. Perhaps it's a family legacy, a trauma, or even societal expectations. His pursuit of revenge became an escape from confronting the emptiness, the lack of an authentic self beneath the trauma. And this is the mistake everyone misses. It's easier to chase an enemy than to build an identity, easier to destroy than to create. You think you're fighting for something. Often you're just running from something else. His refusal to accept help, his push for isolation, can be seen not as strength, but as a fear of disruption. Genuine connection threatens the singular focus of obsession. It introduces complexity, nuance, and demands a shift from the simple, clean narrative of my goal against the world. For someone whose identity is built on that singular focus, anything that broadens the perspective feels like a threat to existence itself. So what happens when that purpose is taken away? The cycles of betrayal and vengeance he experienced created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Each layer of truth peeled back didn't lead to enlightenment, but to a deeper, more refined hatred. This is the danger of allowing external circumstances to dictate your core identity. You become a prisoner of reactions, forever chasing the last perceived wrong. It traps you in an endless loop, where closure is a mirage, always just beyond reach. You might chase validation your whole life, only to find the goalposts constantly shifting. His redemption is often debated, but from this perspective, it's less a redemption and more a repurposing of his existing design. He found a new external mission, protecting Konoha from the shadows. It's still a role, still a function, still an external purpose. It's an evolution of his containment, not an escape. He didn't find himself, he found a new way to be useful within the established system. This wasn't growth, it was containment. It's the comfort of a familiar structure, even if that structure is a cage. This narrative mirrors the real-world challenge of breaking free from cycles of generational trauma or inherited expectations. When your entire identity is built upon what happened to you, rather than who you choose to be, you are always dancing to someone else's tune. Sasuke Uchiha is a stark reminder that sometimes the hardest battle isn't against an enemy, but against the very definition of yourself given to you by the world. It requires a radical internal shift, a true confrontation with self, which Sasuke often skirted. So, what does this tell us? Sasuke Uchiha's story is not just a tale of power and rivalry. It's a profound exploration of how external forces can meticulously sculpt an individual's entire being. From the moment he witnessed his clan's demise, his future was not his own. It was a carefully constructed path, where every choice, every betrayal, every surge of power served to keep him on a trajectory of singular, consuming obsession. His life became a testament to the power of a well-placed narrative. His aloofness was a necessary buffer. His contradictions were necessary plot points. His genius, a necessary tool. He was less a character expressing agency, and more a highly refined instrument for exploring themes of destiny, fate, and the psychological weight of inherited trauma. He became a conduit for the story's grander design, rather than its independent architect. But here's the contradiction. His greatest struggle was not against Naruto or even Itachi, but against the framework that defined him. He was forever trying to break free from a script he didn't even realize he was following. And that, in itself, is a deeply human struggle. The need to carve out your own identity, to choose your own purpose, even when the world seems determined to define it for you. This is where it breaks. The genius of his portrayal lies not in his complexity, but in his deceptive simplicity. He is a mirror, reflecting our own anxieties about purpose, belonging, and the haunting echo of the past. He doesn't offer easy answers because his design isn't meant to offer answers. It's meant to provoke questions about the nature of identity itself. So what happens when that purpose is removed? He serves as a potent reminder that the most compelling characters are not always those with the most agency, but those who most powerfully embody a particular human condition. For Sasuke, that condition is the seductive, destructive allure of a singular obsession, continuously reframed and redirected. The story never truly lets him escape the cycle. It just shifts the objective. This isn't to diminish his journey, but to reframe it, to see him not just as a character making choices, but as a masterpiece of narrative engineering, illustrating the profound grip of design. His story resonates because it taps into a universal vulnerability, the desire for clarity, even if that clarity is a mirage, leading you deeper into a labyrinth. And the cost? Often the very self you seek to define. Sasuke Uchiha's narrative may have concluded, but the question it leaves behind lingers. How much of what you call your destiny is truly your own making, and how much is merely a response to a story already written for you, by the world, by your past, by the very traumas that shaped you? Perhaps his true genius was making us believe he was ever truly free. His journey was a circle, not a linear path. The echoes of his obsession continue. What patterns are you following, convinced they are your own choices? What purpose, given to you, are you still chasing? The story is over, but the reflection it offers, that is just beginning. What will you choose to see? His alliances, often seen as erratic, were simply pragmatic shifts within his fixed trajectory. Allying with Orochimaru for power, then forming Hebi for revenge against Itachi, then joining Akatsuki to destroy Konoha. Each step was a logical, almost inevitable progression once his core obsession was established. He wasn't changing goals, he was simply finding new, more effective means to an end that had been set for him. This wasn't growth, it was containment, The emotional neglect he experienced after the Uchiha massacre created a fertile ground for this design, a void that needed to be filled. His friends tried to fill it with connection, but the narrative had already provided a stronger, simpler, more singular purpose: revenge. This primary programming overrode all subsequent attempts at genuine connection. It's a stark portrayal of how deeply embedded trauma can resist healing, if not properly addressed. Even his signature abilities, the Sharingan and later the Rinnegan, reinforced this cycle. They offered him unparalleled visual prowess, allowing him to perceive and analyze. But what did he analyze? Primarily weaknesses, opportunities for power, and targets for his vengeance. The very tools meant for insight became instruments of his singular focus. The power he gained merely fueled the predetermined direction. This is where it breaks. His confrontations, especially with Naruto, weren't just clashes of ideals. They were attempts to pull him back to a path not sanctioned by his design. Naruto represented the path of connection and belonging. Everything Sasuke was structurally programmed to reject in favor of his isolated, obsessive quest. Their rivalry, therefore, was less about who was stronger and more about who could maintain their narrative integrity. And this is the mistake everyone misses. This mirrors the human tendency to double down on a belief or identity, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence against it. The sunk cost fallacy, but for identity. You've invested so much into being this type of person or chasing that specific goal that letting go feels like dying. It's a terrifying thought to discover the very foundation of your existence was built on sand. So what happens when you finally confront that sand? The final battle against Naruto and his subsequent rehabilitation feels less like a true conversion and more like a recalibration. He didn't abandon obsession. He merely redirected it, from destroying Konoha to protecting it from its shadows. The single-minded focus remains. The isolation remains. The internal landscape largely unchanged. The external mission simply updated. It's a very clean, almost too perfect narrative closure for a character designed for endless pursuit. His periods of calm, particularly after the Fourth Great Ninja War, were not peace. They were periods of dormancy, waiting for the next catalyst. The narrative needed him to be a powerful but contained force, ready to be unleashed when a new threat emerged. This is the difference between genuine character development and utility within a plot. He wasn't evolving beyond his design. He was fulfilling it in a new phase. This wasn't growth. It was containment. How often do we, in our own lives, mistake a shift in activity for a shift in self? We change jobs, move cities, find new hobbies. But if the underlying pattern of how we relate to the world remains the same, the need for external validation, the fear of true vulnerability, then we are merely rerunning old programs in new environments. Sasuke's journey is a mirror for this continuous, often unconscious self-deception. You think you're moving forward, but are you? The very premise of his character, the last Uchiha, imbued him with an inherent, almost genetic sense of purpose and burden. This wasn't merely a backstory, it was a psychological anchor that defined his entire existence. He was born into a legacy that dictated his actions, whether he knew it or not. This is where it breaks. His relationships, even with Sakura and Sarada, feel less like organic growth and more like fulfillments of narrative necessity. They tether him to Konoha, to a normal life, but don't fundamentally alter the core of his being or his self-imposed isolation. He is present, but always slightly detached. The design demands it. This detachment, even within intimacy, is a common self-preservation mechanism. When your identity is fragile, built on the shifting sands of past trauma and external purpose, true vulnerability feels too risky. It might expose the emptiness underneath, so you keep a part of yourself hidden, always, always ready to retreat, to defend the carefully constructed self. This isn't about love. It's about survival, even if it's a lonely one. You recognize this resistance to intimacy, don't you? The constant cycle of seeking power, then feeling insufficient, then seeking more power, is the engine of his obsession. It's a self-perpetuating loop. Each new enemy, each new challenge, simply gave him another reason to push further, to become stronger, never realizing the strength he truly needed was the one to redefine himself outside this cycle. This is the mistake everyone misses. His internal monologues, when they occur, often revolve around his objective, his pain, his need for power. Rarely do they delve into introspection beyond what serves his immediate purpose. This isn't a lack of depth. It's a precise narrative choice to keep him locked into his predefined role, preventing too much self-awareness that might derail the plot. The story needs him to be driven, not necessarily enlightened. How much of our own inner dialogue is truly self-reflection, and how much is simply rehashing old grievances or reinforcing existing biases? The mind can be a powerful tool for self-deception, constantly seeking to confirm what it already believes, especially if those beliefs give it a sense of purpose, however destructive. Sasuke's inner world is a stark illustration of this cognitive bias. You think you're analyzing, but are you? His arc, therefore, is not a failure of character writing, but a triumph of narrative design. It successfully guides the audience through a complex web of motivations, twists, and revelations, all while maintaining the integrity of Sasuke's fundamental, engineered obsession. He is precisely what the story needed him to be, at every turn. This is where it breaks. Even his moments of vulnerability or supposed humanity are often strategically placed. They serve to deepen the audience's investment, to make him relatable before he inevitably returns to his designed path. These glimpses of softness are not true shifts. They are temporary departures, ensuring the audience doesn't disengage from his plight, making his subsequent, harsher actions sting more. It's a calculated rhythm. We often interpret these flashes of good as signs of inherent decency, clinging to the hope of a character's redemption or our own. But sometimes they are just moments of weakness or simply a strategic retreat before the core programming reasserts itself. It's hard to accept that sometimes a glimpse of light is not the dawn, but just a fleeting shadow. You've been there, haven't you? His awakening to a broader worldview during the war wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was the result of direct, explicit information delivered by Itachi and the Hokage. He didn't arrive at these conclusions himself. They were given to him. This external input was necessary to redirect his destructive force towards a more acceptable narrative function. This wasn't growth, it was containment. His ultimate role as a Shadow Hokage is the perfect encapsulation of his design. He is powerful, solitary, operating outside the official structure, yet ultimately serving it. He is still the outsider, still the one apart, but his destructive power is now harnessed. It's the ultimate control of an engineered character. Give them a sense of purpose, but keep them on a leash. And this is the mistake everyone misses. Many of us seek roles that allow us to feel important, even if those roles demand a certain isolation or sacrifice of personal freedom. We justify it as necessary as our burden. But sometimes that burden is just another form of self-imposed imprisonment, a way to avoid the messy, uncertain work of true integration. What noble sacrifice are you making that truly isolates you? The lack of true, unburdened joy in Sasuke's life isn't an accident. It's a consequence of his design. An individual whose entire being is dedicated to an external, all-consuming purpose rarely experiences peace. There is always the next threat, the next mission, the next ghost to chase. It's a relentless, joyless pursuit that many recognize in their own lives. This is where it breaks. Even his decision to travel the world after the war, to atone, feels like another phase of his assigned role, the lone protector, gathering intelligence. It's still a mission, still solitary, still purposeful. It's not a journey of self-discovery, but of continued utility. The character must always have a function. We often mistake constant motion for progress. We keep busy, keep chasing the next thing, convinced that one day it will all make sense, and we will finally feel settled. But if the core issues of identity, purpose, and self-acceptance remain unaddressed, then all that movement is just an elaborate dance around the truth. Sasuke Uchiha's journey is a profound illustration of this restless pursuit. You're always moving, but are you going anywhere new? The ultimate legacy of Sasuke Uchiha is not his power or his redemption, but the masterclass in narrative manipulation he represents. He is the ultimate example of a character whose story feels inevitable because it was always meticulously planned, every twist and turn serving a larger, unseen purpose. He is a testament to the power of design over free will. This wasn't growth, it was containment. He is a warning, a mirror. The constant chase, the shifting loyalties, the external definition of self. How much of your own story is truly yours? How much is a script you've been handed? The final silence around his journey offers no answers, only a stark reflection. What will you do with that reflection? Every time Sasuke gained a new power, it served to escalate his immediate objective, not to broaden his perspective. The Mangekyo-sha Rinnegan for specific revenge, the Rinnegan for perceived revolution. These were not tools for introspection, but for acceleration of his preset course. The abilities reinforced the obsession, never challenged it. And this is the mistake everyone misses. We often seek power or resources, believing they will solve our internal conflicts. But if the core drive is flawed, more power simply allows us to pursue that flawed drive more effectively. It doesn't fix the underlying issue, it amplifies it. Think of how often people acquire wealth or status, only to find their anxieties or destructive patterns merely shift scale. You gain the power, but what does it truly serve? The continuous cycle of being rescued or guided by others, Naruto, Itachi, even Orochimaru in a twisted way, further cements the idea that Sasuke is an object to be moved rather than a subject acting autonomously. His agency is constantly being overridden or redirected. He is never truly without a guide, even if that guide is an enemy. This is where it breaks. His seemingly ultimate goal of destroying and rebuilding the ninja world after the war was the logical extreme of his isolated perspective. It was the only way his obsession could manifest on a global scale, still driven by an us versus them mentality. It was the final, desperate attempt to impose his singular will. This wasn't growth, it was containment. This mirrors the human tendency to seek control when feeling powerless. If you can't control your inner turmoil, you try to control your external world, sometimes to destructive ends. It's a grand, dramatic coping mechanism, often rooted in a deep-seated fear of chaos or the inability to reconcile conflicting truths. You've seen this impulse, haven't you? The lasting appeal of Sasuke Uchiha lies in this very tension, the character who constantly strives for freedom, power, and self-determination, yet is perpetually bound by a narrative architecture that preempts his true autonomy. He is a testament to the idea that even in fiction, fate can feel inescapable, especially when designed with such precision. This is the mistake everyone misses. His journey concludes not with a roar of triumph or a sigh of peace, but a quiet, almost resigned continuation. The storm has passed, but the wind still blows in the same direction. What legacy does that leave us with? The question persists. What truly defines freedom? What truly defines freedom? For Sasuke, it was often the absence of external control, the eradication of those who sought to direct him. Yet, even in his current wanderings, his path remains subtly circumscribed by his past, by his guilt, by the ghost of Itachi, and by Naruto's unwavering belief. He is no longer driven by hate for a specific target, but by a form of self-imposed penance, a devotion to a new, greater good that feels less like choice and more like the inevitable next stage of his predetermined arc. The chains are invisible now, woven into the fabric of his own morality. He seeks redemption, not liberation from his inherent design. He remains a weapon, merely pointed in a different direction, still serving a purpose, still shaped by others' expectations and his own deeply ingrained sense of duty. The loneliness he projects is not a choice, but the solitary existence of a highly specialized instrument.